controversy of the highest order, the Nigerian Senate hits back at the Minister of Works and Housing over claims that lawmakers are responsible for the bad roads in Benue State. Also on the program, we will talk about public expectations from the 9th National Assembly. My name is Tijesu Adeoye, and you're watching the Hallowed Chambers. Babatunde Raji Fashola, Minister of Works and Housing, told eminent political leaders from Benue South Senatorial District that 600 billion naira was proposed for his ministry in the 2020 budget, but it did not get the approval of lawmakers. Now the Senate is out with guns blazing against allegations they say are false, and they rubbish accusations that constituency projects are prioritized over other capital projects. The outspoken spokesman of the Nigerian Senate, Ajibola Bashiru, says never has allocations meant for other projects been diverted to constituency projects, as the execution of the much talked about constituency projects lies within the executive arm of government through the various ministries, agencies and parastatals.
Not the fault of the National Assembly. If a projection is made for 256 billion, and that has been approved, I don't think there's a problem for us. But if you now, from 256 billion, go and make an enactment of 600 billion, of course you are aware of the recent history in the past assemblies when they talk of budget padding. So the National Assembly, under the present 9th Assembly, does not want to be accused. So just like even the Minister of Finance said, I think about 2 days ago, at the National Assembly, there is a need for the executive to really prioritize projects. And one of the challenges that we have about budgeting in Nigeria, and I said that during the speech I made on the 2021 budget, is the fact that we budget far less for capital projects. Like under the 2021 proposed appropriation, only 3.2 trillion is actually going for capital projects, whereas the debt recurrent expenditure and non-debt recurrent expenditure is about 8 point something trillion. That means that we are spending far much on recurrent expenditure. As Honorable Minister, then I was a commissioner, you will make projection. Then when the Budget Office, the Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Finance will now look at it within the context of what is called envelope. So it may well be that the minister proposed 600 billion to the executive. But what actually came to the National Assembly was the figure in what was presented publicly by Mr. President. So I will not know, since I don't work for the executive at the federal level, I wouldn't know where the 600 billion became about 256 or 260 billion. It may well be within the process of putting what everybody has brought to the executive that they have brought that one. So I'm not in a position to say, but I know that 600 billion was not brought for works and housing before the National Assembly by the executive.
Members of the House of Representatives Committee on Finance grilled the Minister of Finance when she appeared before them to defend the ministry's budget proposal for next year. But the minister warned that the economy may slide into another recession caused by the biting effect of the COVID-19 crisis. She told the committee members that the federal government is considering another hike of 2.5% in the value-added tax. Chairman of the committee, James Faleke, says despite all these challenges, the federal government should ensure it meets the expectation of Nigerians.
We have, from the ministry's perspective, a national monitoring and evaluation department. We also have a budget department that has a monitoring and evaluation function. But the real responsibility of monitoring the implementation of the project on a day-to-day basis is that of the project owner.
We have serious problems in our hands, and this calls for collective and collaborative efforts from all stakeholders in our efforts to revamp and rebuild the Nigerian economy in the interest of the generality of Nigerian people and the future generation.
After the break, I will sit down with the Director General of the National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies to talk about the public expectations for the 9th Assembly. And let's start a conversation around public expectations from the 9th National Assembly, as well as the 2020 to 2024 strategic roadmap for the National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies. And joining me to put this in perspective is Professor Abubakar Suleiman, Director General of the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. It's nice to have you on the program, sir. So looking at the legislative agenda for the 9th Assembly, how clearly will this be communicated to the lawmakers to ensure they live up to expectations?
Thank you very much. The study, which is all about expectations, trying to gauge public opinion on what they expected of the United Assembly, was carried out by the Institute for Legislative Study within the content of the belief that democracy is all about people. And the main epitome of democracy in any polity is the legislature. Executive, the president, the governor could win election from just one geopolitical zone. The executive could come from one geopolitical zone. The governor could come from one, could win election through the instrumentality of one senatorial district. But what you call the legislature represent the shade of all opinions, interest group in the country. And as such, democracy is not complete without the legislature. So whatever comes out of the legislature, the parliament, in terms of decisions, in terms of debate, in terms of resolution, in terms of lawmaking, is seen ideally as emanating from the people, from the environment. And that is why in the bill to settle down for legislation, for lawmaking in the 9th Assembly, the Institute deemed it fit to go into the environment, to go into the public, and ask questions of what Nigerians expected of the 9th Assembly. So that whatever comes out as resolution, as law, must be seen as a true reflection of the wishes of the people.
Can you tell us more about these key recommendations?
The recommendations are very clear. One of the key recommendations, which is a bit strange to you, is the fact that most respondent Nigerians, we ask them questions about what they believe should be the priority of the 9th Assembly, of the legislature. Yes, everybody believes they are lawmakers. They must make law for the good governance of the country. But essentially, we ask questions on what should be the priority. And majority of them, almost 60% of them say the priority of the 9th Assembly should be to attend to constituent projects. And this has been an issue between the executive and the legislature.
Of course.
So when we carry out the study, Nigerians believe when it comes to constituency projects, the parliament should know better. And therefore, they are expecting the 9th Assembly to see to the implementations of the constituency project, identify what their needs are in the various constituency, and implement. That's a key, recommendation. I mean, it's a key outcome of that study. And we are now saying, if this is a major, outcome of the wishes of the people, then the parliament must establish a structure, the structure between them and the people. That structure must enable the people to have access to them, because whatever the feeling, the perception of Nigerians about Nigerian parliament, most of them emanated from the media, what the media says. This study has come a long way. One, to address what the misgivings are all about, to address the expectations of Nigerians, and to even look at the various perceptions. What are the perceptions? How do they feel the legislature in the first instance? So, the implementations of the outcome of the study, the recommendation, we get a long way. Not only to deepen the relationship between the legislature and the people, but even to deepen the tenet of democracy. Rubber stamping of legislature, which is now being attached to this 9th Assembly, is a perception. And it's a relative notion, depending on who is saying it. your standpoints, and where you belong. As far as we are concerned in the Institute, and personally, I've not seen anything to suggest that Net Assembly or the legislature is a rubber stamp legislature. Yes, rubber stamping of the legislative arms, yes, to a large extent, you could talk about the legislature at the state level. But at the national level, right from 1999, we've been having this kind of up and down between the friction between the legislature and the executive. In the 8th Assembly, it was so tense, even within the same political party. We had problem. But the question is, you had a lot of bills. The highest bill being passed in the history of National Assembly so far was in the 8th Assembly. The highest bill not being assented to by the executive was recorded in the same 8th Assembly. Who suffers? Nigerian people. The question is, must we continue in that direction? There could be frictions. There could be some up and push and pull between the two arms. The principle of separation of power must be respected, but there must be check and balances too. So, but when you have this kind of hits between the two arms, it affects governance, it affects dividends of democracy. Nigerian people, suffers a lot from this kind of frictions. So what the Net Assembly has done, what they are trying to avoid, was a situation where the frictions, in an attempt to checkmate the excess of the executive, Nigerian people suffers. And that's why they said, we are ready to cooperate with you, we're ready to work with you. But even then, when they try to do that, we have seen instances of disagreement. We have seen instances where the executive and the legislature, under this Net Assembly, had the face-off.
Yeah.
We have seen instances where the Speaker of House of Representatives had to call the shot of the executive arm, called to question some ministers, called to question some ambassador. The recent time, he even issued what seemed like a threat that if certain things are not done by the executive, I will not append my signature. Is that rubber stamping? We have seen instances where the Senate President made a bold statement, especially on the issues of probing or because of this public hearing, to say, look, we cannot take this from the members of the executive. So when you see cooperation, people misperceive it as fusion, as appendage, as subservience. Then when you see conflict, people say, hallelujah, they're happy. As long as we continue to have frictions, if we have prolonged conflict, if we have prolonged feuds, if we have prolonged disagreement, things will not work. One thing we must know is that in a democracy like the one we operate in Nigeria, which is Western democracy, is one democracy that tends to give the executive more power than the legislature. The legislature, the National Assembly, they may decide to withhold veto, but when that one is done, it affects the people. Don't forget the issue of Magu. Don't forget the issue of some ministers or chief executive. Invariably, is the people that suffer. So, why I agree with you that the legislature must be seen to be relatively independent. I use the word relative. Then, where there's need for them to work closely with the executive, they must do it. The issue of budget acceleration passage was a case in question. Nigerians believe, no, why must they hurry up to do it? If they had not hurried up to do it that time, nobody envisaged COVID pandemic. What will have happened? When we had revised budgeting on account of COVID pandemic, they need to really start down, do something orderly to get certain things done. Today, we are in a case of emergency situation. And when we are faced with such a contingency, we need to speed up, government, processes. So if you don't have an executive, legislative rapport that could work together, that could cooperate and do things in tandem with Nigerians' wishes and aspirations, we are going to have serious problems. So the reality is that the legislature in Nigeria, just as the legislature in advanced democracy, they must bear in mind the fact that the kind of presidential system we are operating is one that tends to favor the executive than the legislature. And where that it is, therefore, when there's need for them to give to Caesar, they must give to Caesar. Yeah. When there's need for them to withhold certain things in the interest of the people, they must do that.
The House of Representatives has kicked against the planned concessioning of the country's 4 international airports until all labor disputes within the sector are resolved. Chairman House Committee on Aviation, Nolin Naji, says this would be in the overall interest of the country.
The concession of the 4 airports should be put on hold, pending the resolution of the contentious issues raised by the union and other stakeholders to avoid industrial actions that may further cripple the already distressed industry. We are hopeful that at the end of the day, our intervention will provide the opportunity for all the parties to reach a common ground that will move the aviation industry forward.
A senior advocate of Nigeria, Olisa Agbakuba, has sent a letter to the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, recommending a simple way to restructure Nigeria. The content of the letter proposes a constitution alteration bill that will ensure there is devolution of power from the federal to the state governments. The former chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association suggests a committee should be set up to review the 98 items of power and assign what is best to federal and what is best to states based on the principle of subsidiarity. He also wants the exclusive and concurrent list to be renamed as the Federal Legislative List and the State Legislative List. The federal government will exercise reserved powers and the state will exercise devolved powers. The last 2 weeks have been a busy period in the National Assembly as both chambers suspended plenary to allow members focus on budget defense sessions with ministries, departments and agencies. House Committee on Power, chaired by Magaji Aliu, also grilled the Ministry of Power and other relevant agencies in the power sector. He speaks to the Hallowed chambers on his committee's efforts to make the MDAs under his purview accountable.
As far as my committee is concerned, we are beginning to get on the same page with them. Whatever is pending, it has to be actualized. I don't want to carry backlog. So, like you see, the issues you have been on the news, on the TCN side, they had almost 156 billion contract backlog, and I saw a lot of new contracts in the budget, which I declined to approve. Which I told them that we have to finish what we are doing. If we have small money, that money will be allocated to existing contracts. So as far as I'm concerned, there won't be no new any project in TCN. Unlike on the issue of NAC, like they are the regulatory agency for this sector. There are some monies that are due to Rural Electricity Agency, which I said I'm not going to take them off until we know where those monies are. Yesterday, I'm satisfied. They came with all the documentation, and we are now on the same page with them, and REA will get their proper funding. You see, it is just the Act provide that after their audit, the balance, the money that they did not use, will go to Rural Electricity Fund, and the Act provide that the market operator will also give some certain amount of money to REA. But for a long time, it has not been achieved. But God in His mercy, we have achieved it yesterday. And despite what we agreed, I asked them to go and commit it in writing, to write to me, so that at least we'll be on the same page. You see, this is the most important time for the agencies when they come to do budget. So sometimes they may not even listen to you. Or let me use, if I'm not using a harsh word, please pardon my language, the respect is not reciprocal, you know. For whatever reason, they more respect the ministers and their colleagues in executive than us. So this is our time. They either do what is correct or we do our work. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I try to ensure that I'm thorough. And this money are appropriated where it will be put to good use. You can see a column of debt. Sometimes even, I'm just reading a narration to one of the CEO of the agencies. The narration does not make a sense. That they said that they want to do 7.5 MBA substation for 20 million naira. You know, this can be a white elephant project. So we are going to be thorough in this committee. We'll ensure Nigerians get value for the money. Unfortunately, they will see that they will be blaming the members. We don't do anything here. Everything is in the executive. So I'm not being hard or being harsh. I'm only doing what I've been asked to do.
To get more updates on the program, follow our social media platforms at tvcnews.tv. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is Tijesu Adeoye TVC. That's our program this week. See you next time.